My name is Mavis. I am 71 years old. And for 6 months, I wore black for a husband who wasn't dead. But here is what nobody knew. Not my children, not the lawyer, and certainly not James himself. By week 3, I had figured it out, and I made a decision that changed everything. Stories like this are exactly why I started Elder Story Corner. If you believe that loyalty should be earned, not just expected, and if you want to hear the truths that families try to hide, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us share these stories of justice with the world, and it lets us know that we're not alone. Thank you for being here. Now let me take you back to the day I walked into the study and found the ghost in the machine. James and I built our life from nothing. 48 years of marriage. A logistics company we grew from a single truck and a prayer. A home we designed together, room by room. 2 children we poured everything into. Jamie, our son, and Joan, our daughter. I say we poured everything into them. I mean that literally. Our time, our savings, our energy, our belief that if you raise children with love and intention, they become people worthy of that love. I am telling you this so you understand what it cost me to learn what I learned. When the call came in March that James had suffered a fatal heart attack abroad, I fell apart completely. He was 72 years old and had seemed tired lately, yes, but I was not prepared. No wife is ever prepared. The body was cremated overseas, per a letter that arrived with his personal effects. His final wishes, it said. I never got to say goodbye. I cried for 2 weeks without stopping. I wore black. I sat in his chair. I held his reading glasses and talked to him like he could still hear me. And then my children arrived. I want to be fair. In the beginning, I told myself they were grieving too. But grief does not make you inventory a parent's jewelry. Grief does not make you back a truck up to the garage and remove both cars within 10 days of a funeral. Grief does not make you sit across from your mother and tell her she is no longer capable of managing her own affairs. Joan took my wedding ring on the 3rd day. She held my hand, looked at my finger, and said sweetly, Mom, let me keep this safe for you. You won't want to lose it while you're so upset. I let her take it. Jamie arranged the lawyer meeting 2 weeks later. I sat in Mr. Sterling's office, a man James had trusted for 30 years, and watched my son and daughter sit on either side of him like they owned the room. Sterling slid a document across the desk, a codicil he called it, a final amendment to the will, apparently signed by James before he died. It left 90% of the estate to Jamie and Joan. It left me a monthly allowance contingent on his word, good behavior. What does that mean? I asked. Jamie leaned forward. It means you live in the house as our guest mom. You don't sell anything. You don't spend excessively. You cooperate. That's it. I looked at my son, the boy I nursed through pneumonia, the boy I drove to every practice, every audition, every interview. I signed the paper, but I want you to understand something. I did not sign because I was broken. I signed because I was thinking. A grieving woman notices things. That is something people do not understand about grief. It does not make you blind. In some ways, it makes you sharper. When everything familiar has been stripped away, you pay attention to what remains. I noticed that James's study, a room he had always kept locked, had a faint light coming from under the door at night. I noticed that the Wi-Fi router showed active connections at 2 in the morning when Jamie and Joan were asleep. I noticed a small camera mounted on the eave above the garden shed, angled precisely at the back door of the house. James had always refused cameras on the property. "Privacy is sacred," he used to say. I noticed that the letter announcing his final wishes, the one that arrived with his personal effects, was typed. James had never typed a personal letter in his life. Every note he had ever written me was by hand. I sat with these things quietly for 3 days, and on the 4th day, I accepted what they meant. James was not dead. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment. Not relief, not joy, not even anger. That came later. What I felt first was clarity. James had staged his own death to test our children. He was somewhere in this house, watching everything on those screens, waiting to see whether Jamie and Joan would protect me or prey on me. He had his answer by now. We both did. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I could have walked into that study and confronted him immediately. Part of me wanted to. The part of me that had wept for 2 weeks and handed over my wedding ring and signed a document that made me a guest in my own home. But I am 71 years old. I have learned that the most powerful move is not always the fastest one. If I confronted James privately, the evidence stayed in that room. Sterling would deny everything. Jamie and Joan would claim the documents were valid. We would have a family argument and nothing more. But if I waited, if I let them continue, they would keep building their case. And so would I. I decided to wait. I went back to being the grieving, cooperative, gullible mother they believed me to be. And I started making my own preparations. I am not a lawyer, but I was married to a careful man for 48 years, and careful men teach you things. I began quietly documenting everything. I wrote down every conversation. I noted the dates Jamie and Joan removed property from the house. I photographed the camera on the eve. I kept a copy of the codicil they had made me sign. I also called a friend, a woman I had known since we were 30, whose son happened to be a fraud attorney. I did not tell her about James. I told her only that I believed the codicil I had signed was forged, and I needed to understand my options. She connected me with her son. He told me that a forged codicil, combined with documented theft of marital property and recorded statements from witnesses, would constitute fraud, conspiracy, and elder financial abuse. All serious charges he told me to keep gathering. I did. Meanwhile, Jamie and Joan threw a party. Celebrating the future, they called it. I sat upstairs and listened to them toast to being free of the old folks. I heard Joan tell a friend that I was so gullible, I still thought James had loved me best. I wrote it all down. Then 2 weeks later, when they presented me with the house transfer papers and told me to sign, I was ready. "Just do it, Mom," Jamie said, sliding the papers across the kitchen table. "Stop being selfish." "I agree," Joan added. "You're only delaying the inevitable." I looked at them both, my children, the ones I had stayed up nights for, the ones I had loved without condition for their entire lives. "Before I sign anything," I said calmly, "I think we should wait for your father." The room went very still. "Mom," Jamie said slowly, "Dad is dead." "Is he?" I said. I walked to the foot of the stairs. "James," I called, "it's time." He came down the stairs slowly, leaning on a cane, thinner than I remembered, his hair grayer, but upright, present, alive. Jamie's coffee cup hit the floor. Joan made a sound I have no word for. Behind James came Mr. Sterling, pale, sweating, a man who had clearly been given a choice the night before and had chosen the only one that would keep him out of prison. And behind Sterling came two police officers. James stood in the center of the room he had watched for 6 months on a screen and looked at his children. I had expected him to speak first, to deliver the verdict, to be the one who closed it. But he looked at me, and I understood. This was mine to close. I turned to Jamie and Joan. "Your father faked his death," I said, "to see who you were. I discovered it 3 weeks in. I spent the remaining 5 months documenting who you are. The forged codicil, the stolen property, the recorded conversations. Your father has the footage. I have the paperwork. Mr. Sterling has agreed to testify." Joan started to cry. "Mom, we're your children." "Yes," I said, "you are. And I raised you better than this, which is why I am not doing this out of anger. I am doing it because what you did is a crime, and the law exists for a reason." The officer stepped forward. As the handcuffs clicked, Jamie looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "Mom," he said, "please." I held his gaze. "You did this to yourselves," I said softly. "I am not taking revenge. I am simply taking back what is mine. James and I have made our peace, though it took time, and it took honesty. He told me the doctors had given him a year to live, and he could not bear the thought of leaving me unprotected. I told him that 6 months of grief is not a small thing to ask of a wife, and he needed to understand that. He understood. We are spending his remaining time doing what we should have been doing all along, traveling, sitting on the porch in the evenings, laughing at old stories, making new ones. The charges against Jamie and Joan moved forward. Sterling cooperated fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. The real will stands. Everything came back to me. Every property, every account, every share. My wedding ring came back too. Jamie and Joan are out on bail. I'm told they're barely speaking to each other. I pray for them. I mean that genuinely. They are still my children, even if they are not the children I thought I had raised. This story taught me something I did not expect to learn at 71. I had always believed that my strength came from James, from our partnership, from having someone beside me. But in those 6 months, mourning a man who was watching me from upstairs, I found out who I was alone. I was sharper than they expected, more patient than they counted on, more dangerous than anyone in that lawyer's office could have imagined. A woman who has built a life from nothing and lost it once knows exactly how to build it again. Do not underestimate the woman in black. She may be the most clear-eyed person in the room. Subscribe to Elder Story Corner for more true stories of family, betrayal, and justice, where we learn that the truth always rises, even from the grave. If this story shocked you, share it with someone who needs to hear it and tell us in the comments, was James right to fake his death? Or did he go too far? Until next time, trust your instincts and guard your heart. My name is Mavis, and this is my story.